All right, so the question we are looking at today asks, a large atom like uranium has many occupied subshells. How many are in the n equals 3 shell? Now, if this is all new information to us, we're going to have to go back and define some things in order to better understand what the question is asking us. So let's start off with the first part, which we're looking at a large atom of like uranium. If we look at the periodic table and find uranium, we can see that it is very large. So let's go look at some definitions. So the element that we were looking at is uranium. Now, an element is a substance that is made entirely from one type of atom. This is an atom that I drew previously and messed up on. So that's the nucleus, and this is the atom. Now, before we go into that, let's just take a look back at the book and look at this Schrödinger equation, which attempts to describe stable electron energies in an atom. So the Schrödinger equation is a mathematical model, uses their wave-like nature of electrons to describe their energy in an atom. So wave-like nature, very similar to wavelength. If we're looking at an electron that travels like this, far apart, and then gets closer and closer and closer and closer and closer together, the energy will travel in this direction. This is the yellow indicating energy. So down here is going to be high energy and low energy. So let's go back to the atom. Now within the atom, there's going to be shells. Shells are regions away from the nucleus that electrons can exist. So this is going to be our first shell. That's going to be the second shell. This is going to be the third shell. We can indicate those by writing n equals 1. That's the first shell. N equals 2, second shell. N equals 3, that's the third shell. Now, again, these are just regions away from the nucleus that electrons can exist. So they can exist within here, and within here. So now let's define subshells. Subshells indicates the shape outlined by an electron as it orbits the nucleus. And there are 4 different types of shapes that they can travel, and they look like this, but I'm gonna redraw it again just so we can understand a little better. So if this is the S, this is the nucleus, there we go. This is going to be the electron, can travel like this and like this around the nucleus. So that's going to be the first type of orbital. The next type of orbital is going to be P shape. This is the nucleus. This is the electron traveling around the nucleus. The last one we're going to look at is going to be D. This is the nucleus, and it's going to travel like, this is the path of the electrons. It's going to travel around the nucleus, and it's actually not going to touch the nucleus. So these are the 3 different types of orbitals that we can see electrons traveling within the nucleus. So let's go back to our book now and look at this nice little table that is telling us for the first shell, n equals 1, the allowed subshells, again, the direction of the electrons traveling, is only going to be in the S shape. So let's see what that looks like. I'll take red. So it's saying that electrons can only travel within this fashion in n equals 1. For shell 2, n equals 2, it says the allowed subshells are s and p orbitals. So that means in this shell, electrons can travel in the S shape. So let's do S. And what color? Green. Green for P. So in n equals 2, electrons can also travel like this. Now n equals 3, that is the shell the question is asking us about. It says how many subshells are in the n equals 3 shell. So this table tells us that the allowed subshells in n equals 3 is S, P, and D. So let's take a look back. So this, again, is the n equals 3 shell. The different shapes, orbitals that a electron can travel is our S. Okay. Our P. And now we have a new one. Let's do light blue. That's going to be D. And that one can travel like so. And that is describing the allowed subshells in the n equals 3 shell. So the correct answer should have been 3, the S, P, and D orbitals.